It's the Christmas present nobody asked for. It is back right on time. It is, of course, the European Super League, but hopefully in a more welcome manner in your world. We are also back. The Anglo-Italian pod, almost got the title wrong. As always, my name is Rory, and I'm joined by my very good friend,
Adam. Buon Natale, Vesorshant, and Merry Christmas
grazie.
to you all on this last ever episode of 2023. Rory, it feels like it's been loads of episodes, and I can't really kind of comprehend in my head right now all of those episodes, but it's been a slog. It's been loads. There's been loads.
As we've covered quite a lot. And weirdly, I hope they're more memorable for the listener than they are for me, because I can't remember many of them. But there have been a lot of them. We've gone through Arsenal very nearly winning the league and then breaking my heart. We've gone through Man City winning their first European Champions League. We've gone through the start of this season, 2 Super Leagues, or maybe 1 Super League launch within this year. 1 Super League launch within this year.
Yeah.
And countless memes and managers sacked and rehired, right? There's been a lot to cover. There's been a few. We are going to go over our highlights, lowlights, and kind of funniest moments of the year as we get towards the end of the show. But listener, as I'm sure you're aware, just before this show, yesterday, me and Adam were kind of talking, thinking, what are we actually going to talk about? Like, the Carabao Cup and the Coppa Italia doesn't really fill that much time. Well, Florentino Perez must have been listening, because he's done us a massive favour and he's dropped an absolute clanger today that everyone's obviously talking about, and this is the European Super League Mark II. This time it's personal. Adam, what was your first initial reaction? I saw the tweet from Real Madrid saying Florentino Perez is holding a press conference at midday, and I thought, oh, here we go. What was your first reaction? Are you surprised it came around this quickly? But it's also been a surprising amount of time since it came around, right?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a surprise in terms of the timing, shall we say? Because obviously, clearly, that gives a lot of momentum to Joan Laporta and Florentino Perez to kind of start off 2024 in terms of planning now. And they've got the backing, obviously, in terms of financial side of things. But yeah, I was surprised to an extent in terms of that they were managed to overturn the decision initially. And yeah, I think it's going to have huge ramifications if they manage to push it through as well. So, but on our side, I suppose, Rory, is that we're seeing a lot of clubs and leagues kind of categorically say they're not going to stand for this. They're not going to be on their side. And that, I suppose, gives you a bit of hope. But for how long, I suppose, is a big question. And how long will it take for money to talk, I suppose, is the big question here. We knew about the owners of certain clubs' intents here. And obviously their disregard for the fans. And although they've presented quite a snazzy kind of presentation of how it's going to outlook and benefit the game at overall level, there's a lot of question marks around the integrity of the competition. And it wasn't that long ago we talked about players and having enough mental time to recover, as it was from this long season that they're currently embracing right now, but now to have this thrown in as well. And it's interesting that I've been reading up on the alternative views as well, those that support the ESL. And I appreciate this is a very small minority at this moment in time.
A vocal minority, nonetheless.
Yeah, but they're making it very clear that this is the way that it's got to happen. And it hasn't quite sunk in for me yet. But what was your initial reactions? Because I know what you actually shared with us on the WhatsApp group. But for those that obviously can't see that, Rory, what was your initial thoughts on this?
Just a big sigh of like,
again.
Like, here we go. My first thought was, and it all comes from, it's all summed up by, right, let's think about the 3 teams who are still sticking with this. Right?
Yeah, of course.
So we've got Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Juventus.
Yeah.
Juve, who have just been docked points for financial whatever. Various nefarious dealings within their financials.
Of course.
Barcelona, who are in financial crisis, are currently being investigated for bribing referees in UEFA competitions and in Spanish competitions. And we've got Real Madrid, who are still under investigation because they sold their training ground to the Madrid Council for a massively inflated price so that they could buy the Galacticos, right?
Yeah.
So 3 teams who are very, very, very keen for UEFA to lose their power, right?
Yeah, of course.
And 3 teams that have shown at every opportunity that they are only out for themselves. Like every other team, right? Like Arsenal, like Manchester United, like Chelsea, like Atletico Madrid, like Crew Alexandra, right? Every club is out for themselves. But not all of these clubs are trying to sell themselves as the paragon of virtues and the saviours of football. Now, I don't think these are... If I could pick 3 teams I'm not going to follow into battle, it's Real Madrid, Barcelona and Juventus, to be honest, right? Yeah. And Florentino Perez, for him, like, we all know that UEFA have many flaws, right? We know that UEFA are not the paragons of virtue either.
Of course not.
We know that Seferin's quote about football is not for sale is absolutely laughable, right?
Yeah, of course.
We know there are things that need to be changed with UEFA, and maybe the one positive about this is that UEFA are having to look at what they can do to kind of maintain power, change what they do, whatever, being super ambitious. Maybe that's a positive. But I think ultimately I look at this launch and I think this is just a man, Florentino Perez, who is desperate to catch up with the Premier League. And the only way he can think of doing it is this. Your thoughts before I'm going to get a little bit, it's the one thing that makes me a bit Brexity this when I hear Europeans talking about this, but I'm going to get your thoughts on Florentino Perez and the launch.
I think there's a quote that I've just read that kind of sums him up. And this was, we wanted to remind everyone who Real Madrid is. And that, for me, kind of sums up his arrogance, just not just in general, but in the way he approaches things. It's always got to be that he's got to be at the top of the table. They've got to dominate, and they've got to be the kind of decision makers, essentially. And they've been craving this opportunity to basically, dominate the decision making at the top table. They've not been able to obviously get their way. And I feel like this is just sums him up, really. I mean, this whole competition format and the fact that Joan Laporta as well, bitter rivals, right, in Barcelona, is happy to cozy up with him purely because they know what a financial mess they're in, that they're having to do a competition like this just to make up ends meet. And then you've got Juventus, right? Agnelli started this all off, and this just like sums up Juventus to the core, that you can't trust them to be any stallion at all at the table. They are just there for pure greed's sake, and that's it.
And I think if ever there was a doubt that this is, because they're selling it as this saviour of football, and we care about the progress, and this is where football naturally needs to go. But then he comes out with the quote that we need to remind them who Real Madrid are. Yeah. If you have any doubt about who this is for, it's for fucking him. Like, it's not even for Real Madrid. It's for him. So and I just think the characters who run these clubs, Agnelli and the rest of them, are not savoury characters, as much as the heads of UEFA aren't savoury characters. So I would rather stick with the organisation that has history, that has legacy, that is at least in name and more so than it would be an independent regulator, right? You think football's unbalanced now, right? Let the football clubs run football, right? And see how unbalanced it gets, right? Like, at least UEFA and FIFA in name and to a certain degree are still independent, right? They are still, they look at football from what is in their interest as opposed to what is in Real Madrid's interest, what's in Manchester United's interest, right? So I think I would much, 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 much rather stick with them and try and improve it from the inside, right? It's encouraging that a lot of teams and leagues have turned around within 5-6 hours and said, we're not interested. And ultimately, a Super League without the Premier League, without the Bundesliga. There you go, that's fireworks. They celebrate. They agree with me. Without Ligue 1, that is not a Super League. Because ultimately, instantly, you're losing the majority of the good teams, right? And I've seen some very loud Italian journalists today talking about Brexit means Brexit. English clubs aren't allowed to come in. Don't be upset when you're not invited. Well, I tell you what, if you could market your league better, you'd be able to fucking catch up with the Premier League. And if you cared about your lower leagues, you'd be able to have a competitive pyramid that improved the youngsters that are coming into your national team.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I am glad about Brexit for is that we are not involved in this fucking shit show. None of the European laws apply to us. Cool, see you later. We will keep the Premier League. Have fun with whatever you want to do. Honestly, it's the one thing where I'm like, I'm glad we got Brexit because none of this fucking applies to us. And if you think it all just comes, and I'm starting to rant, I realise, but it all comes across to me as just sheer bitterness about the Premier League. Oh, well, we don't want you in our party. You're not invited, even though the fact that the Premier League would still compete and be better than a European Super League that doesn't include the Premier League clubs. Yeah. Like, I think there's a lot of European fans who are, again, selling themselves as we care about the future of football. You only want it so that your team's competitive again. Let's just be honest about it. Just be honest about it. Just say, I want my team to have as much as West Ham, and that's why I want us to be in it. Let's just be fucking adults about it and not bullshit it as some saviour for football. It really, really annoyed me today. Really annoyed me because I think these are some people who try to portray themselves as like people who love the game, who care about the game.
Yeah.
Don't give me that bullshit if you're supporting this, because that's not what it's for. If you look at, and we'll get into the format, we can play the video, Adam, once I've finished with this rant.
Of course, yeah.
But you look at the format, the last thing it does is encourage competitiveness. Like, should we play the video and then we can pick it apart?
Let's do that.
Create the world's most exciting club football competition. Our proposal aims to ensure competitive tension throughout the year. It's an open system featuring promotion and relegation and 2 stages, a league stage and a knockout stage. The European Men's Super League will have 64 participating clubs, divided into 3 leagues, Star, Gold and Blue. The Star League consists of 16 clubs divided into 2 groups of 8. It's the same for the Gold League, 16 clubs, 2 groups of 8. The Blue League will have 32 clubs split into 4 groups of 8. During the league stage, clubs play each other within their groups, home and away. That's 14 matches per club each season, 7 at home, 7 away. The top 4 clubs in each group of the Star and Gold Leagues and the top 2 clubs in each group of the Blue League will qualify for the knockout round, starting with the quarter-final. The quarter and semi-final consist of a 2-legged knockout round, home and away. The final will be played on neutral ground. The knockout round finals winners will be the Blue League, Gold League and Star League champions. Our proposal is built around sporting merit. Promotion, relegation and exit from the competition happen each season. The club finishing at the bottom of each group of the Star League will be relegated and replaced by the 2 Gold League finalists. The same system applies in the Gold League. The last club of each group will be relegated and replaced by Blue League finalists. In the Blue League, 20 out of the 32 clubs will leave the competition altogether and be replaced by clubs depending on their domestic league performance. This system ensures mobility within and across leagues. And as matches will be played midweek, this format is completely compatible with domestic leagues. This proposed format for football will guarantee openness, competitive tension, and success based on sporting merit. It is one competition for all clubs, all players, and all fans.
Now, watching the video, I don't know how many more times they could fit sporting merit into a video and relegation and promotion. It's impressive, right?
It is very impressive. They generally got the jazz hands out there. They knew what they were trying to hit, weren't they? And that was all born from that kind of protest initially, wasn't it? Because the format in itself wasn't going to promote any of this. So they've had to redraw the diagrams and everything that they were planning to do initially and make sure that other teams were included and probably give them a smaller share as they've got the Blue League, right? But yeah, I suppose...
It sounds fucking shit as well. It sounds like something on Pro Evo. Blue League taking on North London Red, and like it just sounds fucking awful. But
it's terrible.
What? We can pick holes in it. Let's go. My first hole to pick is that if a team, for example, like Union Berlin this year, right? Mm-hmm. They got into the competition first time in their history. They were rewarded by playing Napoli and Real Madrid, right? Huge moments for the clubs, money spinning opportunities, matches that will go down in history with their fans, right? In this new format, if they somehow fluked a qualification, they would get the benefit of playing, no disrespect, Red Star Belgrade.
Probably,
right?
Yeah.
For them to have to earn the right to play Real Madrid, they would have to qualify each year, I think, because if they dropped out in the domestic league, they then wouldn't be in it. And each year they'd have to get promoted, so they'd have to have 3 successful years in both the league and the European competition to then finally play a Real Madrid, for example. Right? So while there is promotion and relegation, there isn't really promotion and relegation, right? You're still in that Gold League. Gold League is the top one, right?
Yes.
Was it Star League? I can't remember.
Star League, they call it.
Star League is the top one. In Star League, you're just going to have the same teams, except maybe Arsenal drop out on it every other year because that's what we do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
What were your main issues, before we get to the financing of it, because there's huge issues there as well, but what were your main issues with the format?
I think it's more the vagueness of leagues and the interpretation of these like teams that are going to participate in the various different stages. Obviously, I think the top tier league that they refer to as a Star League, I suspect is going to be those that have got the biggest power within the kind of the organisation. And I suspect this kind of demotion of teams are unlikely to happen if you kind of say, look, we've had a shit season. Here's like 10 million worth of revenues that we don't actually need. You can keep it as long as we keep our place at the top table. Because I suspect that's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of bargaining chips around. Can you imagine Real Madrid being demoted out that Star League? The guys that made the concept of this competition being demoted, I can't see that happening. I cannot for the life of me see that happening. So I think there's ultimately, although they kind of make this kind of situation sound like it's a legitimate kind of promotion relegation format, I can't see that happening. That was the whole point of the Super League in the first place, was extra games to play there. Also, although it's not covered in that initial video, it's around the free TV streaming facility as well.
This is what I wanted to talk about.
I wonder how long that lasts for. Is that going to be for 45 minutes, or like, do you have to subscribe after a minute, like one of those streaming services? I mean, it's just...
I was trying to figure out how they've come to this, because obviously it was thrown in as the last bullet point as well. Like, free streaming. Like, right, okay, so this thing that is going to live entirely off TV revenue, because you don't care who's in the stadium, this is about TV revenue, right? That thing that's going to survive solely off that is going to be free.
Exactly.
I'm not sure how that works. I think it's just something that they're kind of like, okay, this is going to be a hard sell, guys.
Yeah,
we need one more thing that we can just say and then reel back on later and be like, oh no, actually it wasn't financially viable. You need to pay €40 a year to watch your club and your club only, whatever. And then if you want to watch Real Madrid, you got to pay another 40. We know that's horseshit for one. So instantly it feels like it's not as it did the last time. And they've had 3 years, whatever it was. It still doesn't feel fully thought through.
No, it doesn't.
It still feels like Florentino Perez is just, and Juan Laporta, I don't want to focus on him, and Agnelli, all three of them, are just kind of throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. Yet again, 3 years later. It's so fucking depressing. But the thing is also, it is still inevitable. The only thing that stops this is that clubs continue to value their domestic game. And I think whilst Germany and the Premier League and Liga stick out and say, look, we know this isn't what we want, then ultimately it can't happen. Because a Super League with Dutch teams, Belgian teams, Serbian teams, and Real Madrid and Barcelona doesn't sound particularly interesting to me. Maybe chuck in the Portuguese teams as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
still not really grabbing any headlines.
No.
Invite the Saudi teams. I'm still not watching. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it just relies really on the key leagues holding their position. And I think the encouraging thing is that this independent regulator in the UK is getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
The British government commented today and said we are going to do everything in our power to make sure this doesn't happen. The Tories are actually doing something good for once, so that helps. So I feel like it's still a non-starter. It's still not what they want. And no matter how much they try to say, it's like the Emperor's New Clothes. I don't know. It just feels like they're kind of trying to sell us this thing, and everyone can see what it actually is. But also, I think the point you made about which teams go into it, the coefficient's really interesting, because that blue league, I imagine, would be 7th and 8th place teams from the Premier League rather than the champions of Greece, for example.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? They're not going to get Legia Warsaw in there, are they? Because they don't bring enough money.
This is my thing. You won't see Vilnius, for example, in Lithuania, or HAK Helsinki turn up in one of those stages. I can't see that happening. For one, it's probably not enough clout for them. There's not enough money, revenues being made out of those teams to appear at this stage. And like you saw, wasn't it 20 clubs exit this kind of blue league? 20. That's a hell of a load of teams. Now, I can imagine that being a consistent of like your Saudi teams, maybe Russian teams potentially in this mix as well. But yeah, these kind of teams that have got rich owners that are prepared to kind of foresee that happening, and then see them in a year's time, essentially. See you back in a year's time because they've got the clout. But again, to my point, I just cannot see how that's sustainable in terms of like driving people to watch these games as well. Because imagine it, like you've got your top tier games, you probably will want to watch them, right? The middle kind of tier, maybe one or two. But when it comes to the bottom tier, you might as well just call it the Conference League again. You might as well just say...
It's what we do currently. We all watch the Champions League. We watch some games in the Europa League that we find interesting. And we watch the highlights of the Conference League, unless your team's in it. That's what people do now. So it would be exactly the same thing. But if we kind of move on from the Super League almost and kind of switch our focus to UEFA and FIFA, they have now announced that it's being rumoured that they've announced. I've not seen it officially on UEFA feed yet. I've seen it on kind of aggregate accounts. They are abandoning the Swiss model in the Champions League next year. That didn't take long, did it? If that's true, that really didn't take long, and that is a positive of the Super League. Thank you, Super League, if that happens. UEFA... Now, I think it's a positive that the law came to the decision that it did, right? That the court came to the decision that UEFA and FIFA are not able to monopolise football, right? They cannot stop other people from competing against them. I think that is a very good thing, right? Do you think this is a big and a much-needed wake-up call for UEFA and FIFA in terms of what they can and can't get away with?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've got away with it for so many years, and this is basically backing up those points that the likes of Perez and etc. I've been kind of quoting, is that they've had too much power. They've not been actually reforming the game, and they're not benefiting anyone apart from themselves. So in that respect, it's interesting to see Sefrin kind of use quotes like, we realised these issues over a year ago. We accept this ruling. We know this is time for reform. This is time for change as well. And we've already kind of gone about it. But the problem is I don't see those changes. I don't see that reform that he talks about. And this is the problem, that if he continues to sit on his laurels, there'll be a few clubs that will go, did we really need to kind of make a stance against the European Super League if he's not actually taking action, if he's going to act on his kind of grey horse and kind of acts as if he's going to do something? He's not going to do anything, I don't think, immediately. But if he is true about the Champions League format, that is a hell of a brave move to kind of change straight over after this decision. It'll be interesting to see what kind of further reforms that he does introduce. And I think he needs to work closely and collaboratively with the bigger clubs around Europe as well going forward. Because otherwise you're going to see this kind of format just spiral and force club owners to kind of make that decision to take their teams outside of UEFA competitions and move them elsewhere. And look, we've had an influx of Americans come over, not just in England, but also in Europe. They
in
are
Italy,
starting
there's
to,
a lot of American owners,
and this is the point. They're starting to think of how can they bring franchise kind of models across to these kind of shores. How can they kind of make the most of it and make them even bigger kind of names around the world? So, UEFA and FIFA have got to take a better grip of the situation at the moment. It's a big kick for them right now. But yeah, Rory, I'm not feeling too confident. I'm not feeling confident that they can turn it around. I don't think they can do the open-mindedness in terms of the approach. But I'm happy to be proved wrong on this one. But for now, I'm kind of grateful that we've still got them, if that makes sense, because it still allows your Union Berlins, etc., to have their day in the Champions League. And I'm hoping that continues. And what we're hearing right now about the European Super League doesn't come to fruition, because I just don't think it's got many legs in it.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think it has. The also interesting one is for FIFA as well, as they try to make a land grab for club football as well.
Yeah,
of course, the Club World Cup kicks off in 2025, the new format. So this, I'm not even going to try to. I don't know how clubs qualify for it beyond league finishes and winning European trophies. I think. So this is like the World Cup. It will take place every 4 years from 2025, and is obviously FIFA trying to get some of that sweet domestic football money, because the World Cup just isn't enough. And is this something that could force clubs further down the European Super League route? Because if you think about, for example, a Premier League club now, you finish your league in end of May, early June, right? You then have 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off. You have your pre-season in July. You do your pre-season tour. Then you have your European qualifiers, and then you don't stop again until the end of May, beginning of June. Right?
Yeah.
At what point do these players find time, if it's a non-tournament year, right? Because if it's a tournament year, you get a week off and a week off the other side of the tournament, right? So, at what point do the clubs turn around and say, we actually have a we have a responsibility of care here for our players, and we can't just run them into the ground? Or do they get to a point where they have to have 50-man squads, like we talked about before, which then forces teams who are already struggling financially to have 50-man squads to compete, and then you end up killing the game lower down further? Do you think this competition could also force more teams to kind of look at the Super League in a more appealing way?
I think it's still a negative in that sense. I think it's still another competition, and there's not been a mention of player welfare that I've seen about the European Super League at all. It's just been a fact of that this can be still afforded alongside the domestic kind of fixtures, which just means that what is potentially suggested here is that you kind of navigate past UEFA or FIFA competitions potentially. This is the way I interpret it. It could be wrong, but yeah, the way I read it is that they're trying to offer this as a competition alternative to the Champions League, etc. And you know what? That's dependent on how many clubs get on board. I think at this moment in time, it does sound like it's going to struggle though initially, and it could be a few years pain before you kind of start seeing maybe some clubs take the kind of gamble and go for it, because they might struggle. How long will it take Man United to kind of clamber up and kind of go, do you know what, we're not winning stuff at the moment. Why don't we just enter this? Because we've got a chance of winning this, because we haven't got any of the big clubs surfacing. So, but to your point, I think you're going to start seeing clubs like your Barcelonas, etc., start to hoard up to 50-man squads. I mean, that is just how it feels at the moment. And this is just, if you think what we speculated a few weeks ago before this decision was made, we kind of speculated this was the way it was going to go, because otherwise, how do you maintain kind of players being able to relax and, not have constant regurgitations of injuries? Because, ACL injuries seem to be more common than they ever were before. Those kind of things used to take like a year before you recovered. Now it's kind of almost given that by 9 months you should be recovered. You should be ready to go again. So look, I think what we just don't seem to appreciate at the moment is that we're trying to make money, or these people higher up are trying to make money out of the game, but not having a real damn clear sight of what this will have in terms of impact of person's health, their mental health as well. Because I mean, imagine as it is, we talk about the UK and the Boxing Day fixtures, right? Like the amount of like professionalism that's needed for you to just, not eat the Christmas turkey on Christmas Day,
not see your family on
not
Christmas
see
Day.
your family. I mean, you might be going through a lot of shit during that time as well. Like mentally, you're then having to make sure you kind of have game face for the next day because you've got to be at your A game. So I think this is just so badly thought out, and there's not been, like you say, any kind of liaison. Is basically sticking shit onto the wall and hoping it sticks. So I think it will come to a point where players will start kind of saying, no, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to play. So it'll be interesting, but I don't think it's going to get to that stage just yet. Anyway.
No. Well, we'll see. I think it'll be a few days of noise and then it'll all fade away again. And then we'll wait 3 years and then it'll come back and eventually our will give up. It feels like there's a lot less anger in the reactions today than the first time it came around, which I think there's a myriad of reasons for that. But I think there's a lot more people who have taken time to think about it and are suddenly coming out on pro, which I'm disappointed by, I'll be honest. I am disappointed by it. I've seen a lot of people have takes today where I'm like, we are never going to agree. We are very, very different football fans.
Exactly.
And I think as I get ready to go and watch Crew Alexandra tomorrow evening as I fly back to the UK, I could not be prouder of the football pyramid we have in the UK and how well supported it is and how well run it is, and how there's many flaws, but if you compare it to Serie C, Serie D, or the third division in Spain or whatever, I'm so proud of what we've got, and I think I'm just really happy that if this independent, or when this independent regulator comes in, we'll be looking after English football and keeping the heritage going, because I don't ultimately what we want to win is your national league, right? The Champions League is incredible, but you want to win the league, right?
Of course
you want to be the best team in your country, and I think we want to win the FA Cup. You want to win the things that mean something in your country, and I think we can just hope that continues. And the people who, I've said what I needed to say, I think. So we're gonna kind of leave that there. I think. Was there anything else you wanted to cover on it?
I think that's it for now. We'll wait until it rumbles again, right?
Exactly. We can all enjoy our Christmas. We can enjoy the Premier League football and the Championship football, right? That takes place over the Christmas. And it should be good. We're going to leave that there.